Beautiful people. Thank you so much for taking the time to check out this video. It's your man, it's your friend, it's your brother Cordell Glass, and reading the Bible is vital. I'm so excited that I have the opportunity to share the Word of God with you one more time. Today's been a phenomenal day for me. I hope it's been the same for you whenever you're watching this video. And today we're going to jump into 2 Kings chapter 15. And I'm going to read it from the New Living Translation. Before we do that, just take a moment. If you haven't already, go ahead and subscribe to this channel. Please share this video with someone else after you take a look at it. And if you like it, please hit the like button. And while you're subscribing, also hit the bell notification so that you can change it to all so that you get every single video that we post. So here we go, 2 Kings chapter 15, New Living Translation. Let's go. Uzziah rules in Judah. Uzziah, son of Amaziah, began to rule over Judah in the 27th year of the reign of King Jeroboam II of Israel. He was 16 years old when he became king. No excuse, youth, teenagers. You guys can exercise power and rule. If over nothing else, you can rule over yourself. You can repeat after me. I have self-control. There you go. Kings, young queens. That's the start of kingship. That's the start of being able to rule well, is first of all being able to rule yourself. All right. So he was 16 years old when he became king, and he reigned in Jerusalem 52 years. I could be wrong, but from all the kings that we've seen reign thus far, I believe this is the longest tenure, 52 years as king. So he was what, 68 by the time his reign was over. And I think most of the time we've seen maybe like the average of about, we've seen the range, I think, from anywhere between maybe mostly like 7 years up to maybe, 40 years, usually nothing more than that. Definitely there's been some incidents where it's been less than that, as we've been reading 1 Kings and 2 Kings. But I think the majority probably end up being king for like 20 to 40 years. All right? In which a lot of people would consider 20 to 40 years being like the prime of your life. And so Jeroboam II, he was granted some serious grace that he was able to reign for 52 years. That says a lot about the favor of God on his life, and I'm not sure if he deserved it or not. Let's read and find out. His mother was, did I say King? Yeah, King Jeroboam. No, Uzziah. Sorry, we're talking about Uzziah. Uzziah was 16 years old. He reigned for 52 years, not Jeroboam II, because Jeroboam was the king of Israel, while Uzziah became the king of Judah. He did what was pleasing in the Lord's sight. Bam, there you go. Just as his father Amaziah had done. But he did not destroy the pagan shrines, and the people still offered sacrifices and burned incense there. So he allowed some foolery to still go on within his domain. And it says here, the Lord struck the king with leprosy, which lasted until the day he died. Leprosy here, meaning it could have been any various skin disease, but it was a serious enough skin disease that where it goes on to say here, the king's, where it says, which lasted until the day he died, he lived in isolation in a separate house. So whatever he was dealing with was deemed to be contagious. Even if it wasn't, the people feared it enough to where it was important to keep him quarantined. Or maybe he made that decision. I'm not exactly sure. But nevertheless, he ended up being isolated for quite some time in a separate house. The king's son Jotham was put in charge of the royal palace, and he governed the people of the land. Verse 6, the rest of the events in Uzziah's reign and everything he did are recorded in the book of the history of the kings of Judah. When Uzziah died, he was buried with his ancestors in the city of David. and his son Jotham became the next king. Verse 8, Zechariah rules in Israel. Zechariah, son of Jeroboam II, began to rule over Israel in the 38th year of King Uzziah's reign in Judah. He reigned in Samaria 6 months. Oh, wow. That's short. So there you go. He's probably one of the shortest tenured kings of Israel or of Judah. Zechariah did what was evil in the Lord's sight. Notice how when it talked about Uzziah, it started out talking about how long he was king, when he became king, how long he was king, and the reason why he was king for so long. Same thing happens here. It talks about when he became king, how long he was king, and the reason why his reign didn't last very long. It's because he did what was evil in the Lord's sight. That was the norm for Zechariah from day one, I reckon. It says here, as his ancestors had done. He refused to turn from the sins that Jeroboam, son of Nebat, had led Israel to commit. Now, as we've been reading 1 Kings, the latter portion, the second half of 1 Kings was, I believe 1 Kings was either 22 or 24 chapters. And in the latter half of 1 Kings, we find this sin of Jeroboam creeping up. Throughout 2 Kings, many of the kings are referred to have continued in the sin of Jeroboam. Well, let's look back at 1 Kings really quick. I believe it's 1 Kings chapter 11 where we first begin to read about the sin of Jeroboam. We just want to, for some of you all, you may have seen the video. We actually have on the channel here a video specifically on 1 Kings chapter 11. Well, really, every chapter of 1 Kings. So please go back and review those chapters. But I just want to review it really quickly in terms of this sin of Jeroboam. Let me see if I can find it. So just so you know, 1 Kings 11 begins to chronicle or record or review King Solomon and what caused him to lose his kingship. It says in verse 9, the Lord was very angry. This is 1 Kings chapter 11, verse 9. The Lord was very angry with Solomon, for his heart had turned away from the Lord, the God of Israel, who appeared to him twice. He had warned Solomon specifically about worshiping other gods, but Solomon did not listen to the Lord's command. So now the Lord said to him, since you have not kept my covenant and have disobeyed my decrees, I will surely tear the kingdom away from you and give it to one of your servants. And so that servant that it was given to happened to be Jeroboam. All right. So Jeroboam comes into a portion of the kingship. I believe it was 2 of the tribes that were kept under the care of Solomon's child, which I think that moves us into 1 Kings chapter 12, I believe. Maybe, you know what? It's actually, let's see. Solomon ruled in Jerusalem. This is verse 42 of chapter 11 of 1 Kings. Solomon ruled in Jerusalem over all Israel for 40 years. When he died, he was buried in the city of David, named for his father. Then his son, Rehoboam, became the next king. So it's in the chapter of 1 Kings chapter 12 where the kingdom splits. The northern tribes revolt, and that's where Jeroboam comes into play. Now that's where we no longer have a united Israel. We now have an Israel and we have a Judah. So Rehoboam continues to be the king of Judah, while Jeroboam becomes the king of Israel. Bear with me as I find where it begins to talk about the sin of Jeroboam. See, one thing about the sin of Jeroboam that is so horrific, is because God promised that if he followed in the footsteps of David, that God would continue to bless his lineage for generations to come to rule in the house of Israel. Yet Jeroboam, verse 25 of the next chapter, chapter 12, it says, Jeroboam then built up the city of Shechem in the hill country of Ephraim, and it became his capital. Later he went and built up the tower of Peniel. Jeroboam thought to himself, unless I am careful, the kingdom will return to the dynasty of David. When these people go to Jerusalem to offer sacrifices at the temple of the Lord, they will again give their allegiance to King Rehoboam of Judah. So he feared losing followers. So he went to the extreme of disobeying God in fear to lose followers. So it says here, they will again have their allegiance to the king Rehoboam of Judah. They will kill me and make him their king instead. So on the advice of his counselors, the king made 2 golden calves. He said to the people, it is too much trouble for you to worship in Jerusalem. This was the holy place. This is where the pilgrimage would take place. This is where it was necessary for the people of Israel to gather to worship God in the temple of the Lord. But instead of doing that, this fool, verse 29, he placed golden calves in Bethel and in Dan on either side of his kingdom, which turned people away from going to the designated place of worship. They created false places of worship, false idols to worship, all because he feared losing followers. In this age of social media, some people have been chemically rewired to be motivated to do right or wrong based on followership. Some have went to the extreme of doing things they said they would never do in a negative way, all for the desire of followership. Are you willing to compromise so much just so you can keep people liking you and following you that you're willing to jump ship from the promises of God, that you're willing to abandon the favor of God? Your very dynasty is at stake when you allow the desire to please people, the desire to manipulate people to follow you. When you're that desperate for attention, when you're that desperate to be a leader, something's seriously wrong with you. You really need to repent. You really need to change your way of thinking. You really need to come to the reality that a moment of pleasure or a season of pleasure isn't worth a lifetime or generations full of headache, a lifetime or generations full of wickedness. Because as we make our way back over here to 2 Kings chapter 15, we see that pattern repeated. We see that pattern repeated. And eventually it's going to lead to the judgment of the people of Israel. We'll see that as we continue to read here in 2 Kings, especially when we begin to read other books like Jeremiah. We're going to see it, and Isaiah, I believe, as well. We're going to begin to see the issue of the sin of Jeroboam coming into play even more, because it impacted so many generations. What decisions are you making right now that are impacting the generations to come after you? In a positive way or a negative way? We've got to be intentional. We got to be mindful. We got to be sober-minded and not think that our actions, I've said this before in one of our past videos, is that our actions don't just affect us. It affects so many more people in generations to come, but also in our sphere of influence in this time, in this season, in this day. Amen. Amen. Where we at, guys? All right, I believe we're here at verse. I believe we are at verse 12. We'll go to verse 11. Oh no, wait. Okay, so Zechariah did what was evil in the Lord's sight, as his ancestors had done. He refused to turn from the sins that Jeroboam, son of Nebat, had led Israel to commit. Verse 10. Then Shallum, son of Jabesh, conspired against Zechariah, assassinated him in public, and became the next king. Wow. The rest of the events in Zechariah's reign are recorded in the book of the history of the kings of Israel. So the Lord's message to Jehu came true. Your descendants will be kings of Israel down to the fourth generation. So to the fourth generation it happened. Shallum rules in Israel. Shallum, son of Jabesh, began to rule over Israel in the 39th year of King Uzziah's reign in Judah. Shallum reigned in Samaria only 1 month. Good Lord. He might have the record, or it could have been somebody earlier, maybe in First Kings, where they were king for maybe a week or something like that. That's crazy. So for 1 month. Then Menahem, son of Gadi, went to Samaria from Tirzah and assassinated him, and he became the next king. Wow. So the same way in which Shallum became king by assassinating somebody else and becoming king, the same thing ended up happening to him. He gets assassinated, and the person that assassinated him becomes the king. The rest of the events in Shallum's reign, including his conspiracy, are recorded in the book of the history of the kings of Israel. Menahem rules in Israel. At that time, Menahem destroyed the town of Tappuah and all the surrounding countryside as far as Tirzah, because its citizens refused to surrender the town. He killed the entire population and ripped open the pregnant women. Jesus. Menahem, son of Gadi, began to rule over Israel in the 39th year of King Uzziah's reign in Judah. He reigned in Samaria 10 years. But Menahem did what was evil in the Lord's sight. During his entire reign, he refused to turn from the sins that Jeroboam, son of Nebat, had led Israel to commit. 1 Kings chapter 12. Keep that in mind. Then King Tiglath-Pileser, what his names, of Assyria invaded the land. But Menahem paid him 37 tons of silver to gain his support in tightening his grip on royal power. That was smart. Menahem extorted the money from the rich of Israel. Oh wow. Demanding that each of them pay 50 pieces of silver to the king of Assyria. So the king of Assyria turned from attacking Israel and did not stay in the land. The rest of the events in Menahem's reign and everything he did are recorded in the book of the history of the kings of Israel. When Menahem died, his son Pekahiah became the next king. Pekahiah, maybe, I don't know. Pekahiah rules in Israel. Pekahiah, son of Menahem, began to rule over Israel in the 50th year of King Uzziah's reign in Judah. He reigned in Samaria 2 years. But Pekahiah did what was evil in the Lord's sight. He refused to turn from the sins that Jeroboam, son of Nebat, had led Israel to commit. Jesus. When will the fool learn? Then Pekah, son of Remaliah, the commander of Pekahiah's army, conspired against him. With 50 men from Gilead, Pekah assassinated the king, along with Argob and Arieh in the citadel of the palace at Samaria, and Pekah reigned in his place. The rest of the events in Pekahiah's reign and everything he did are recorded in the book of the history of the kings of Israel. Pekah rules in Israel. Verse 27. Pekah, son of Remaliah, began to rule over Israel in the 52nd year of King Uzziah's reign. Boy, a lot of different people became king in Israel during King Uzziah of Judah's reign. He reigned in Samaria 20 years. But Pekah did what was evil in the Lord's sight. He refused to turn from the sins that Jeroboam, son of Nebat, had led Israel to commit. Wow. During Pekah's reign, King Tiglath-Pileser of Assyria attacked Israel again, and he captured the towns of Ijon, Abel-Beth-Makkah, Jano, Kadesh, and Hazor. He also conquered the region of Gilead, Galilee, and all of Naphtali, and he took the people to Assyria as captives. Then Hoshea, son of Elah, conspired against Pekah and assassinated him. He began to rule over Israel in the 20th year of Jotham, son of Uzziah. The rest of the events in Pekah's reign and everything he did are recorded in the book of the history of the kings of Israel. Jotham rules in Judah. Jotham, son of Uzziah, began to rule over Judah in the 2nd year of King Pekah's reign in Israel. He was 25 years old when he became king, and he reigned in Jerusalem 16 years. His mother was Jerusha, the daughter of Zadok. Jotham did what was pleasing in the Lord's sight. He did everything his father Uzziah had done, but he did not destroy the pagan shrines, and the people still offered sacrifices and burned incense there. I don't think anybody since maybe the King David had a complete heart for God. They allowed, even if, sometimes they themselves may have lived personally uprightly before God, but they allowed others to continue in the sin of following the idols that Jeroboam established and introduced into the land. Well, I guess you really could say Solomon introduced some of those to the land, but it didn't make it any better when Jeroboam was offered Solomon's reign and established, probably allowed some of those idols to continue, but he established brand new ones by creating those golden calves. On top of that, one thing I didn't mention prior is that not only did Jeroboam further establish idol worship and refuse the Israelites from making their way to Jerusalem to worship, he appointed people that were not Levites to rule as spiritual leadership. And that was so far from what God desired as well. And so he just had random people that had very little, if any, heart for the things of God or understanding of the things of God, allowed them to just raise up. And that we see that happening today, where we're seeing in the certain churches. I just read an article today in the Assemblies of God. A church had to be, for lack of better words, excommunicated from that denomination because they've decided to embrace the LGBT community in the sense of saying that God is pleased with the lifestyle of the LGBT community, that God has given the right for LGBT community people that also claim to be Christians to have the right to being or licensed, ordained, or certified as ministers. And then not only that, this particular church, it's in the Austin, Texas area, even is allowing same-sex marriages, ceremonies to take place in their church. So there's just a plethora of things wrong with that situation. But it reminds me of the sin of Jeroboam. It's very similar to that. Very similar to that. All right. So verse 35. I don't think I finished that verse. But he did not destroy, talking about Jotham, he did not destroy the pagan shrines, and the people still offered sacrifices and burnt incense there. He rebuilt the upper gate of the temple of the Lord. The rest of the events in Jotham's reign and everything he did are recorded in the book of the history of the kings of Judah. In those days, the Lord began to send King Rezin of Aram and King Pekah of Israel to attack Judah. When Jotham died, he was buried with his ancestors in the city of David, and his son Ahaz became the next king. So there goes the word of the Lord, 2 Kings chapter 15. I think probably repeated in this chapter more than any other chapter. We hear this repetitiveness of these kings conspiring and assassinating someone to become a king, instead of allowing God to position them. They forced their way into leadership, and then once they forced their way into leadership, they themselves continued in the sin of Jeroboam, or they themselves continued to allow idol worship to take place to some degree, the pagan shrines to continue to stand. They also end up being assassinated themselves. So just a lot of mess. The cycle continues, and we're going to, like I said before, we're going to see more of this take place as we read 2 Kings and some of the other books in the Bible. Man, reading the Bible is so fun. It's so necessary. And I'm glad that I'm on this journey with you. I can take you all on this journey with me, just walking through the Bible, just one chapter at a time, making sure that we're ingesting, digesting the word of the Lord. And please, again, like I said at the beginning of this video, share this with somebody else. Allow them to be blessed by the things that we're sharing here. And I'm not the guy with all the answers. You guys, I'm sure, can add some input to this. Some of you can, at least. And, leave some comments as you look at this video. Leave some comments. You may watch this video a few hours after I make it, or a couple of years after I make it. But whenever it is that you check it out, leave some comments. Let me know, what you think about what we're sharing here. Let me know what stood out to you. If you have any questions, share those in the comment section as well. And I appreciate you guys. God bless. Take care.